So one of the things that I wanted to bring to the table today was something that I've seen over and over and over again, and it happens mostly with new agents, but a lot of times we can see it happen with the experienced agents too. And that is, we miss this crucial point in the presentation where we're getting the clients to tell us exactly why they need the coverage, meaning life insurance is never sold. It's always bought based on a feeling of emotion. And our job is to create that emotion by asking a series of questions in a sequence to get them to tell us why they need it. Meaning, I can't remember ever in the last 4 or 5 years ever feeling like I have to sell this person on this plan in order for them to take it today. And and even if you have the individual who's on the other end of the virtual with you, the other end of the virtual, and that person is just show me the price. Just how much does it cost? Just can we just get to it? I just really just want to know, what is this going to look like price wise? Well, one of the things that you can do to just completely shut that down early on is when you're going through, we've gone through this in the past, we've talked about those transitions. When you're going through those transitions, one of the first ones in the beginning is setting the tone for the appointment, meaning just letting your client know exactly what is going to happen here today. One of the things that you're going to tell them is, obviously, one of the things that we're going to cover here today, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, is we're going to go over the cost of the plans, right? We're going to go over the cost of the programs. That's just one way to get the elephant out of the room in the very beginning so that it doesn't rear its head somewhere, 15 minutes in, and you're finding a good rhythm, and all of a sudden Bob just turns you and he's like, can we just get to it already? What's it going to cost me here? What's it going to look like? Do I got to get a second job to get this plan? What? And so have posture, have control, let them know at the beginning, we're going to cover it. Okay. Because you don't want it to break up your chain of events that are going to happen. One of the chain of events is where the sale is made. Okay. So some people like to refer to it as bringing the pain. I've heard it said that if you're not bringing someone into some form of emotion where their eyes are watering up or they're feeling that feeling of, I got to take a deep breath, I got a frog in my throat, right? You're starting to see that emotion come over them. I've been told that that's when you got them. I don't know if I like that's when you got them, but I like that that's when you've brought them to a point where you've been able to stretch their mind. You've been able to stretch their mind to the point where now they're realizing something that they haven't really ever thought of. And when someone crosses that threshold and all of a sudden they go over to that other side of, I never really thought of it like that. I never really put it in perspective. Because most of us, especially the younger generation, feel like we're invincible. I know I did as a young guy, felt like nothing would ever happen. And you'll find people that are in their 50s and 60s, 70s, they still feel like they're invincible. And I love that for them. But the reality is, God has a different plan. We don't know what that plan looks like. If we did and we had that crystal ball, we'd all be working in a different profession. I know I'd be a multimillionaire in Vegas doing a show, predicting everyone's future in the audience. Do you know what I mean? So we have to be able to stretch their mind. All right. I'm going to give you some questions that I've always liked to ask now listen, this can also be done. You don't necessarily have to be a homeowner in order for this to work. They don't have to own a home, but they do have to have important people in their life. Some of the hardest people to persuade that they need a living benefits policy is the single person with no kids, no family, parents are no longer alive, don't talk to their sibling. You know what I mean? Like they've got nobody. Those are some of the toughest people that you're trying to hammer. I see Chuck shaking his head. Those are some of the toughest people to try to persuade. We're not convincing. We're persuading people. The art of persuasion. Those who can persuade make the most money. Okay. So if I asked, I'll just use Chuck, right? So Chuck, if I was talking to you and your spouse, and I just said to you, what do you, just a straightforward question. You just got to sometimes just hit them between the eyes a little bit. Chuck, what do you have in place to offset your expenses in the event of a heart attack, stroke, or cancer?
Nothing.
And so where would you live in the event of one of those unexpected illnesses and you couldn't pay the mortgage? Where would you live?
That's a good question. Never thought about that before.
Have you ever considered how long it will take for the mortgage company to begin sending you the letters, and how long it takes for the calls, the harassing calls? Do you know how long that process takes?
No. How long?
About 30 days. 30 days. It'll actually happen the day after you missed your 30th day. The day after you miss your 30th day, make no mistake about it, you're going to get a strange number call on your phone and it's the bank. And would you agree, Chuck? They don't care about your medical history. They don't care if you were in an accident. They want their money. They want that house being paid. Do you agree with that statement?
That's true. Yep.
Chuck, you had told me that you have a daughter who's going in to be a freshman in high school. You have a son who's going in to be in 6th grade. You had told me, a little bit about that. And you said that you weren't sure where you would move, but I don't know that I'm not saying that you're not telling the truth, but Chuck, would there be someone that you could at least go live with across town that you and your family could keep a roof over your head if you were to be foreclosed on? Where would you go? Who would you go live with?
At this point in life, there's nobody. I mean, I could go bum with a friend for, stick my family. I guess there's a friend that would let us move in for a short period of time, but all the family's gone, and it just and the only family that might is in Las Vegas, 3,000 miles away. So, it would create a mess. Let's put it that way.
Well, I don't know about you, and sometimes friends are closer than family, but a lot of times family is more comfortable to go and at least spend some time with as you kind of pick up the pieces. Right. And, look, you're still going to be dealing with an illness at the same time. So if you did have to go to Vegas, 3,000 miles away, what does that do to your kids, taking them out of their first year in 6th grade, middle school, and taking them, away from all their friends that they've known for the last 8-9 years as they're heading into a new high school? What does that look like for your kids?
Well, having done that 3 times in my life when I was in school, it created some turmoil, and it created a lot of adjustment period 3 different times. And in hindsight, it wasn't very funny. It wasn't very fun to deal with. It was not a funny either, but it wasn't very fun to deal with. So it was a tough thing, and I wouldn't want to do that to them again, or do that to them. I wouldn't want to do it again myself. So.
And so how could you sustain your current lifestyle before all those notices start showing up? Like, what do you have in place? Like, what are you going to be able to, there's got to be something that you can do. Do you have anything set aside, in a 401k, in a CD, in a savings account, money buried in the backyard? Do you have something that could get you by for 30, 60, 90 days?
We've got some savings. We've also got probably about 80,000 in the 401k. And probably enough to get 90 days in the savings account, but that's probably about it. So we probably tap it out in about 90 days.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to assume that the 80,000 in the 401k was meant for something other than, hey, I need to pay my electric bill and my utility bills, and I know I'm going to have to take a penalty because I'm still under age 59 and a half. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what that money was meant to be used for?
Yeah, I don't want to touch that unless I absolutely have to, because it's growing pretty good for nowadays.
Yeah. Right. So guys, right. So there's, now, would you agree that at this point, Chuck is really starting to question, what would I do?
Yep.
What would I do? Here's one that I left out, which I think is always a good one, which is, Chuck, do you have anybody in your family lineage, anybody, your parents, siblings, anybody in your bloodline who ever had any kind of history of heart attack, stroke, or cancer, or any kind of disabilities?
Yep.
Who's that?
Grandparents, both grandfathers.
And what was their medical condition?
One had a stroke, and the other one had skin cancer that got too far, and they couldn't treat it. It spread.
Yeah.
So.
And outside of the two grandparents, has anybody else in your close immediate family that is related to those grandparents, have they had any kind of episodes, even minor?
When they got older, when they were in late 60s and mid 70s, it was parents. One of them had a stroke, but that was related to a minor surgery he had, and then the other one developed ALS. So, but that was in late 70s. So.
And Chuck, I don't want to assume or kind of make you feel any kind of certain way that anything like that would happen to you. I just want to bring to the surface the fact that sometimes those types of illnesses skip over a generation.
Yep.
But what if it didn't? What do you have in place to cover the cost of medical expenses, cover the cost of, cost of living, and do all those types of things that you're used to doing? Like, Chuck, if you couldn't work for a year because of something that happened, something similar to your grandparents happened to you, and you couldn't go to work for a year because you were going through rehab and treatments, how do you do it? How do you keep your cost of living the same? What are you going to do?
Well, I think we'd use the 90 days of savings, and then we'd have to dig into the 401k. There would be nothing, no other option at this point that I can see.
Yeah. So guys, I don't know how many questions that was that I just had for Chuck. I think it was at least 5.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Right? That was at least 5 questions. At this point, Chuck is either going to feel a very different type of certain way about his current circumstance and about what his future might look like, right? Because I just painted the picture, but he was holding the brush. He held the brush. I asked a series of questions in a sequence to get him to tell us what that painting looks like. Don't sleep on that question of, tell me about your family history, because people know, and guess what? People keep it in the back of their mind what happened to a grandparent. People keep in mind what happened to a parent. I know I do. I know I can, look, for what it's worth, I didn't really know my biological father, but I know how he passed away. And it's something that, right, kind of stays, somewhere in the back of your brain, somewhere, right? Think about it a little bit. So, don't skip this part, because here's what you're going to find. You're going to find that when you get to your 3-option close, they balk and say, none of that works, and we need to think about it. Meaning you didn't provide enough touches. You didn't poke enough to get them to make a decisive decision about which plan to choose. See, when you bring up enough pain, when you get them to stretch, it doesn't become difficult to go, I want the one in the middle. Or I found enough value in my own words that I want to pay a little bit more and go with the first option. You didn't have to push them into that.
Right.
They talked themselves into that. But that's how you're going to overcome the objection of it costs too much. I can't afford it. We got to think about it. None of that stuff's going to happen to you anymore. I mean, it still may happen every so often because we're still dealing with human beings, but the majority of your appointments, you're going to skip right over that objection. It's just going to go, they're just going to go, yeah, I'll take that one. Okay. When it comes to what we're going to do for you today, guys, if you didn't just write that one down, here is what we, you and I, here's what we are going to do for you today. What's in it for me? Together. See, I do a lot with the psychology of the appointment, and I use little key phrases to make my client understand that A, I'm not selling them, and B, we're doing it together. When I would walk through the living rooms, I would purposely sit in a space at the table, and then I would take my laptop and I would come and I would sit down next to my client when it came time to doing the application. Because in my mind, I wanted them to be on my side of the table. See, if I could get you to be on my side of the table, then we're in it together. And that's a difference maker. Because how, and I get it, we're doing this virtually. So it's like, well, Brett, how do you get them on? There's still a way to make a connection with someone through Zoom, because we've been doing plenty of Zoom appointments here over the last year. There's still a way to get that person to make a connection with you, to make them feel like they're on your side of the screen. They're sitting next to you in your office. And how that starts is what Chuck and I just did. So when it comes time to here is what we are going to do for you today, we, keywords, are going to do an application together. I didn't say I'm going to do one for you. I said we're going to do it together because we are. Now, could you please do me a favor? Go ahead and go grab your driver's license, grab that blood pressure prescription, that anxiety med, and I'm going to start putting the application together for you. Guys, these little things for you, not for me, for you. I'm going to go put this application together for you, and I'll wait for you to come right back. Here's what you're not going to encounter. You're not going to encounter what, well, I just want to get some prices and really liked everything you said, but I got to pray about it, or I got to go talk to my cousin about it, or my neighbor down the street, he uses the same form. None of that will happen. It goes away. It's like magic. It goes away. You don't encounter that any longer because they don't have a reason to go and talk to an unedified expert because they just told themselves and they believe themselves about what they just told you. Did that make sense? Right? We all talk to ourselves. We tell ourselves all kinds of stories throughout our day, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. We do it. But who do we believe? Ourselves. I hope that nobody's just like walking around talking out loud to themselves. But when you're having a conversation with somebody and you're talking out loud and you're giving yourself the answers from your own brain, you're telling yourself the reasons why you need to have a living benefits policy. You're telling your spouse why you need to have a mortgage protection payment program. See, people, I see people get caught up on, well, Brett, this is a $10,000 policy and they've got a $100,000 mortgage, but they're 70 years old and 72 years old. They don't want 100,000. Excuse me. They want 100,000. They weren't looking for 10 or 12 or 15,000. Well, I'll ask you, agent, take a step back And remember, what underwriter on planet Earth is going to insure them for this living benefits plan based on their medical history and prescription history or their body weight index? Nobody. But you know who will? Those who offer a whole life plan. So get out of your own way about why a whole life plan won't work for Mr. or Mrs. Jones at 10 or 12 or 15,000 when they have a $100,000 mortgage. And instead, ask the beneficiary the proper questions so that they can then nudge the insured and go, I want the $15,000 plan because that gives me a little over a year to stay in the house on a mortgage protection payment program. But here's what we find. We find that people get caught up in, well, $150, $175 for a $12,000 or $15,000 plan. This isn't what they asked for. You do your job based on putting on your insurance cap, and then do an above and beyond job by hammering home to that beneficiary why a mortgage protection payment program is going to leave that spouse in the home for a certain period of time for them to gather up the pieces, begin to live life without that spouse that they had for 50 plus years, and then figure out, do they want to sell the home? Do they want to rent it out? What, do they want to stay in the home? But at least now they've got money allocated to make that mortgage payment every single month. So two different find the pains. One is for that, right? One is for that living benefits client, and one is for that mortgage protection payment client.